panel is called Visualizing the Future of Display Technology. With me here, I have Dan Rossborough, the Director of Strategic Projects at Nanolumens. Can you talk a little bit about your role there?
Yeah, so I run what essentially is an architectural solutions division for Nanolumens. It's partially focused on strategic projects, high-value targets, and also the product development side of the business that caters to architects and consultants that are reaching into our industry for product development and bespoke solutions.
Up next, then, we have Dave Brown, National Sales Manager at Sony.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Brown. I'm the National Sales Manager at Sony. We do so much. I'm really on the AV side of the house. We're so big. We have so many products and solutions that we need to divide.
John Kozlowski is the Regional Sales Manager, Pro AV for the Northeast for Viewsonic.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So my role is to work with the Pro AV resellers in the Northeastern U.S., consultants, architects, the reseller salespeople, and also for your projects to put the teams together from our side that can help you and your customers.
Great. So before we get to the future, what are the biggest drivers of the display market right now? And can you start, John?
So again, from our side, touch is an expectation. And I would say probably 90% of the projects we're being brought into, the displays keep getting bigger as well. I mean, 98-inch with touch, it's a reality. So again, from those sides, and for our customers, touch, but again, we do projectors, we do standard displays with casting as well. And it really, I don't know, the trends that we're seeing just really kind of flow in with that right now.
I think the driver for us is the demand from the design community for highly integrated systems on the direct view LED side. So we build things a lot differently than the rest of the world builds these. We have a patented frame and skin topology that we use that some of you are probably familiar with that allows us to build any size, shape, or curvature and actually, educate the architects on looking at direct view LED as a material versus looking at it as a technology. And my group leads a lot of product development efforts. About half of the products that we make today were invented for a specific client who needed a product that didn't exist in the market. And so that's really what our focus is. And the blue ocean for us is whatever comes out of the next generation of architects and designers.
Well, the driver for Sony is, let's put it this way, customers create the demand. We build the solution. But we play in a little bit of a different space, to relate it to, put it this way, we're not the Volkswagen of display technology. In other words, we're not the low-cost leader. Sony is, in other words, you'll never see a faux 4K anything from Sony. You're either 4K or you're not. So we're really driven to put out high-quality devices that are really giving you a superior viewing experience is really what it comes down to.
So what's the future for projection, do you think? Do you think it's going to be relegated to artistic things like mapping?
No. I still think that economies of scale, size, it'll still stay for a good period of time, at least in education. Okay? Remember this, government and education still use fax machines. So they may be the last to leave, but yeah, we see it going to first panels and then eventually direct view LED.
How is, sorry, go on.
I was going to say from our side, we see projections still running the gamut and for the foreseeable future where you've got companies, be it biopharmaceutical, insurance, where they've got their salespeople who they don't know what situation they're going to walk into, so they need a projector that they can pull out of their bag. And then the flip side, the large venue projectors as well and everything in between. And for home theater in Europe and Asia, we're seeing a lot of call for ultra short throw laser that'll throw a 100-inch diagonal on a wall. We don't see it as much in the U.S. from that side. But, yeah.
I agree with that. We see the same thing. Good observation.
How is AV over IP driving forward the display market?
We're starting to see it more and more. Again, from our perspective, with our interactive panels, you've got the network, you've got your connections in there. They're adaptable for the most part, but we are seeing more and more specs come out, more requirements for it, and we're lucky enough that we've got a product, a series of solutions that fits it really well. And it's I've been in space since 2001. It's been fun to see that transition. It comes slower than faster, but I think that's really going to drive a lot of demand for us down the road in a lot of the new designs and the new installations coming forward.
I couldn't add to it anymore. I agree with him 100%.
I think the big benefit's going to come from when you see more and more of these 5G implementations that are going on globally, giving the ability to the design community to expand the reach of media by expanding the available destinations for endpoints, if you will. So not having to, the current IP systems that are out there now are basically building the back-end systems that'll be ready for 5G once it's here. And the potential is there where you can then deploy large digital signage, if you will, or experiential signage applications wirelessly, which then basically, if you can get power to it, you can do whatever you want. These are huge benefits to anywhere from the guys that build billboards on the side of the road that grapple with this daily, how you actually interchange and control data and manage content, to the large corporate campuses and places like that where you have sprawling networks where you want to be able to actually be adaptable. And that's something that the IP world has given the digital signage industry, and I think it only gets better from there.
Well, 5G will really change everything, not just in the organizations, whether it be an educational or an enterprise organization, even in home. Because I think I read what takes you 24 hours of movies to download now, you'll download in less than 5 minutes. So it'll change everything.
It's all about the ubiquity of the data, right? So being able to put any amount or piece of data in any place to any device. And I think it for the consultants in the crowd and the system designers in the crowd to kind of wrap your head around that concept that we're untethering the world and being able to basically create experiences in spaces where otherwise may have been cost prohibitive from an infrastructure standpoint. I think there's a lot of potential out there, and all these big data systems are leading us down that path.
And just to add to that, we're really starting to see a lot of requests come in around IoT for us in environmentally friendly buildings where you've got maybe a school district that's looking to utilize what they can. We're starting to see some utilities in the Northeast that are actually issuing grants to districts if they can build environmentally friendly spaces. And we're seeing that, in the enterprise spaces, well, not the grants, but we're starting to see a big demand for that as well, and that's really helping with us.
So, Dan, you mentioned the 5G impact that it will have enabling digital signage to grow. What are some other verticals that you guys see that are really poised to grow in terms of display technology?
I mean, personally, at Nanolumens, I deal with a lot of the emerging markets, so it's a great question. This last year we added 2 verticals. So if you had been in a board meeting 18 months ago, you wouldn't have known that themed entertainment and global mega clubs would be verticals for DirectView LED. Reality is, there were dabblings in those industries, but now they're gravitating towards this technology because it can be used as a material and because it can fit a form. And the longevity aspects of DirectView LED in general, now that the pixel pitches are going down and resolutions are getting higher, this stuff's becoming more attainable, and you're starting to see it replace large-scale projection systems in themed entertainment. But our biggest vertical is still the corporate side. We do a lot of corporate and retail and casino and everywhere in between.
Oh, it's definitely the corporate side. In one way. It depends on which product you're talking about, because if you think about it, 10 years ago in higher ed, how many flat panels did you see with signage? Probably none. Whereas today, if a college, and you could ask anybody here from a university, I'm willing to venture to guess, and I'd love to see a study, if they had 100 classrooms with 100 projectors, what's the ratio of flat panels? Is it 200? Is it 300? Is it growing? Is it going to be 400? Whereas that projector is fixed?
And then what we're seeing is a lot in the signage area, especially in the higher ed market. We've seen a huge surge in that in the past, let's say, few months. And also for us, video walls. We're really seeing a lot in the command and control. The systems are getting, the resolutions, you hear about the infinite resolutions and the scalability of it all. So again, that's what we're seeing on our side with that.
I mean, there must be CCOMC members. Are there any CCOMC members here? All right, great organization. There was a lot of chat recently about a couple of schools were talking about potentially starting to put small panels outside of every single classroom with information of what the class is, who's teaching it, how many, as if finding the class with a room number when we grew up, it doesn't work anymore. Well, that would be hundreds right there in any institution. So that's where it's growing, it's panels.
Will 8K have a really big impact on the display side? Because I know there's the potential in the imaging and production side, there's a lot there, but in terms of being leveraged actually into displays, how big of an impact do you think there will be there?
This may sound a little out of school, but I think 8K is more driven by the manufacturers than it is by the demand of the users. How much content is really out there with 8K? We're starting to sell those cameras, but how much content is created?
4K is where we are. We know that will come down the pike. I think to your point, manufacturers drive a lot of it, and then there's an expectation from the end customer perspective of, are you 8K? How soon are you going to be? Can I get the latest and greatest?
I think one part of the 8K phenomenon is the resolution. Certainly resolution is going to drive that, but I think you're going to see more push towards Rec 2020, bigger color spaces, higher refresh rates, specular highlighting, things like that. But in my world, we don't have a fixed aspect ratio or a fixed size because we're not tied to a piece of glass coming off a factory floor. So I can build you an 8K display today. Actually, we have displays out there that have resolutions higher than 8K that are in the built environment right now. So in the direct view LED world, everybody knows it's literally only confined by the size of the space and the size of the budget and the appetite for technology. And we can build you 8K today, resolution-wise. But when you're talking about color spaces and when you're talking about HDR and specular highlights and things like that, those are technologies that really are on the ecosystem side of this that are going to be driven by the consumer market, because that's where the manufacturers are constantly playing leapfrog to try to get ahead of the technology curve to create a competitive advantage. So our industry leads the commercial side of the LCD industry and projection industry to really drive the back-end systems that drive our technology. And as that happens, we have the competitive advantage of being able to build you any size that you want in any resolution that you want today.
I agree with you 1,000%, and what's really solidifying this is, you find this interesting, with CLED, I know in Japan, because I had met them here in the U.S. independently, they were working with former color scientists from Kodak. These are the people who developed Kodachrome, things like that. They're all up there in time. But that's what all they talked about, that what's wrong with you people? It's not about resolution, it's about color space, HDR, color levels, levels of black that we're not achieving now.
And that's the reason that you can buy a 55-inch TV for $400 on sale, and you can go into Magnolia at Best Buy and buy one for 10 grand, right? And nobody, unless you just got money to burn, nobody really gets into the details on this. And to be honest with you, I've shopped it, and the sales guys don't even know what they're selling in that space. And it's because they don't even understand color space or why this is even really important, refresh rates, and they don't understand why that's really even important, because the sources don't support it anyway.
Right.
So there's a whole different world on the consumer side, and the consumer side still drives the commercial side. It really, really does. All of the things that you see in the commercial world today are things that were launched in the consumer world and hardened and sent into the commercial world.
For the most part.
Dealing with flat panels,
Yeah, for the most part. Not always, but for the most part. But again, on the flat panel side, Sony's all about levels of HDR, chipsets, high dynamic range, and as you said, color space. That's what it's really all about over there. 4K, okay, great. Everybody's 4K.
For those of us that are colorblind, does it even really matter?
Well, that's the other. Well, that is actually something that's not been discussed. No two people in this room probably see color alike. To you, the red that you see may not be the red that I see. And I know it's hard to prove, But, you
I don't know.
know,
Is there anybody here from Coca-Cola? Because they all see red. 128C, right? 126C, I don't know, whatever it is.
well, that's the whole thing. If you knew you Pantone and the old analog days, but there really is that really there in digital, and so that becomes another issue. No two people see things alike.
A great caveat, though, is that when you're trying to sell display technology to a Coca-Cola or a T-Mobile, or most recently one that we had was with Fiserv, there is a very non-technical approach to color matching, and it's typically one guy in the organization,
Yep, the colorist,
and he'll literally walk in there and go, "That's not magenta." And so, you know, a company like ours that, you know, half of our company are engineers. We've got several doctorates. We've got a couple lawyers even thrown into the mix for the IP side. And these guys this is their bread and butter. If you have a client that is that picky, we're the type of company you want to do business with, because I'll send a guy in there that knows exactly what he's talking about and knows all the little buttons and triggers to move around to make that match. And so we really excel in that. We have a lot of big commercial clients like Coke and T-Mobile and Fiserv that are super picky on color representation. They don't even want 4K or 8K or Rec 2020.
Right.
They don't even know what that stuff is. They want red.
Right.
We'll give them red.
Well,
So
we just bring in a Sony OLED color reference monitor to match it up to and say, okay, there's your color, right? Yeah.
we're having that problem right now at Grand Central Terminal, where we just replaced a bunch of the big boards down there. And the people that develop the content management systems don't think it matches what they developed. Well, they developed it on a monitor on their desk. And they showed it to the client on a monitor on their desk. And then they showed it to the client on a projector in a conference room. And then when they put it up on a direct view LED display, which is seriously not picky about the input. I mean, we set the red, green, and blue and gamma levels. That's what we do. And so we put it up there at exact representation, and they can't get their head around the fact that we have finite control of that color that they don't have when they're developing the content. So the people on the creative side, you know, just demand what you want and make sure you're working with a company that can give you what you want, because it is attainable.
So kind of want to draw this to a conclusion before we get to some questions, which we have. Do you think displays will evolve over the next 10 years more than they have over the last 10?
No.
Yes.
Yes?
I mean, the micro LED side, that the crystal product that Sony's had out there for years is something that in commercial applications I believe will start to become equitable. In our world, multi-chip technologies, chip-on-board technologies are all these kind of spinning technologies that haven't yet been able to produce the consistency and longevity cycles that we require. We have a product that's built to last for 12 years of continuous duty at max brightness and a 6-year warranty that covers every component on the display. To not get into specifics, but that means you've got to be pretty damn sure about what you're putting into that box. And as these emerging technologies are out there, we're going to let our industry basically go to market first on some of these things and fail hard as we expect them to, and then perfect that and then launch it into the market and control the market in that way.
And you bring up the point about the failure and the longevity, and you look at a lot of the interactive panels out there that are rated for a minimum of 50,000 hours of use. So you've got the customers who are going to have these for quite a long time. Will it evolve as fast or faster in the next 10 years? I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't. No idea.
But to put it in perspective, I started with Nanolumens 5.5 years ago, and the narrowest pixel pitch product we made was 4 millimeters, and it was really cool, and it curved, and it cost like $3,000 a square foot. And the use cases were pretty slim. I mean, there were, airports and convention centers and sports arenas, basically. And then basically there's just this sliding scale, and this technologies keep kind of backfilling that, and now we're at a point where we can be competitive even with the larger flat panels that are out there in the commercial world with direct view LED, micro LED, multi-chip systems. All that stuff's going to just create more and more of a benefit there. So I think you'll see more of this stuff moving to diode-driven visual technologies versus laser-driven or chip-driven, and everybody will kind of try to pick a different piece of the market to succeed in.
So I'm going to go to one of the questions we had here. Are the keen eyes of gamers in eSports pushing the industry?
I wish.
The stock images created on video on gaming are not of reality, and it demanded, or it started the trend of displays creating these images that, like, for example, if you watched it in the movie theater, let's take any of the 1960s James Bond movies, and then you watched it on today's flat panels, it wasn't meant to look that way. The film was softer. The director meant it to be softer. And now even on the panels, because of all the resolution, that I shouldn't be seeing the glue on Sean Connery's tube, and I am. Albert Cubby didn't want us to see that. It was made actually to be, he shot it with projected light in mind. Okay, he knew you were going to a movie theater. So, and the gamers are the ones who drove that technology demand, because the game itself, and Sony's guilty too, PlayStation, is such a stark image. That computer-generated image is not reality.
So gaming is a very intimate thing, right? So you're in a very close proximity to a peripheral that you're playing on. And so anybody who's my age, nearing 40, started out in gaming when everything was CGA and 8-bit, and we had these little monochrome monitors. I don't think I had a color computer monitor until I was like 12 when I started programming. But the monitor that I had to have once I really got into hardcore gaming with World Warcraft and all the stuff that we used to do when we were in high school, you had to have a Viewsonic. Like Viewsonic made the high refresh rates and even some curved screens way before curved screens were even cool. So you probably know more than anything about the gaming side and the drivers on it.
I was going to say, thanks for throwing the softball up for me, but yeah, gaming
had
is
to have
huge for us.
Everybody agreed.
You know, I'd say in the past 2 months, I've been to so many events where we provided the gaming displays, and you had teams from colleges in there competing against each other. And so, yeah, for us, it's driving a lot of what we do. So it's exciting from our side.
To me, it's the same thing, except it was like when TV went from black and white to color. Sorry.
Sure.
I like the way you said, wow, when I grew up.
But then you have the macro environment of the eSports arena, and that's a whole different thing. So that's really the world for DirectView LED on the larger scale systems, but nobody's playing the game on that system. It's completely for the audience. And when you're talking about audience focused or audience-centric systems, you know, there's a really wide gamut of DirectView LED manufacturers that live in that space, and the ones that really succeed are the ones that focus on high refresh rates and high color depth.
I have another question here. If you had to bank on one display technology for the next 5 years, what would it be?
If I was investing, it would be probably MicroLED, because that's what's in your tablets and your TVs and your phones and all those other devices. That's the kind of it's a more ubiquitous media than any of the large format or stuff in the built environment.
No argument.
Yeah, no, I agree from that perspective. But again, I think we all come at it from a different viewpoint. And for us, faster, better, larger. That's faster, better, larger. That's for us.
Question for Dan. The days of rack equipment are gone for DirectView?
The days of rack equipment. I mean, there's a bigger paradigm there. So the real paradigm around rack equipment, and there's a lot of people in this room smarter than I am on the ecosystems that drive a lot of these built systems. What I've seen as a trend over the last 5 or 6 years as a student of the industry is that it used to, even when I first started, it was very much a hardware world where you had discrete pieces of hardware that did certain things. And so you had to stack all these pieces of hardware and make them all play together. And a lot of the companies kind of utilized that, started to try to create corners in the market using multiple pieces of hardware and a head-end stack, where the reality of it is now, this goes back to the IoT question we were talking about earlier with IoT, all of the technology is moving to software. Almost all of it already has. And so if you can build a high-end server, you can pretty much build any of these systems. And even the big hardware box manufacturer companies are literally just now packaging their software and licensing their software. Yeah, they're still building giant, really fancy, awesome, foolproof, fail-proof servers, but you can literally build your own servers and license hardware and build what used to be a giant rack of hardware in a software environment, which is really making this stuff more attainable for a lot of the clients out there that otherwise might have been scared off by just the amount of different components in a rack.
Yeah, I know for us on the education side, K-12 and higher ed around situational awareness, there's so much that can now be done centralized through the cloud that we're definitely seeing that rack go away to a large extent.
It ties back to 4G and 4K and 8K too, because we talked about the trunk size earlier. You know, your cable box is still spitting out 1080i, but we all have high-speed internet and we can all stream 4K. How is that possible? So as those trunks get wider and wider and wider and the data starts to become more available in higher amounts and faster, that's when it's going to really tax those systems and create more and more of a need for high-end hardware. Hopefully the hardware guys get a second whack at it.
Will projection mapping remain a niche, or will it become more common in installations?
It's a niche. It's a niche.
There are only so many environments, right?
Right. I mean, how many places really, in an educational environment, there's almost virtually no need for it, maybe a small percent of the institution. You know, it's more in museums. Believe it or not, there's a lot of it on Broadway. Okay, they don't. If you go to a Broadway show, it's kind of hard to tell. I've been to one for a long time. They got a little expensive, but I've worked with some companies. They don't build wooden sets anymore. They're projected. They just look. The projectors are so good that you really can't tell when you're up there in the audience. So, but there's, you know, most of it is not built. They use mapping for that. But outside of that, in an architectural maybe or a design world, but it's, you know, it's limited.
No, I agree.
So we see it in like themed entertainment as a big vertical. So, you know, the amusement park ride, you know, where the entire environment is surreal. You've got, you know, giant direct view LED display systems to wow people in certain environments, but all the rest of that set is either a physically built set, which is expensive to do, hard to maintain, or it's a blank canvas and a projection map. So you've seen a lot of more on that side, but it's an art form that requires a lot of heavy design, and so it's not really, I don't see it as being anything more than a niche. There's only so many theme parks and so many museums and so many environments for the technology to be used that way. I hope it never goes away.
I have a question about the performance of direct view LED related to the speed of it with lag. So the question is, once the LED is connected to cameras or window processors that create delay, what is the future to improve performance so that you can play games or see live magnification without lag?
I mean, I think we're there now. If you've been involved in any major RFP for a sports arena, you know, there are very strict guidelines written by consultants about total system lag. Obviously, any component in a stack of hardware is going to have its effect on overall system lag. So more of, you know, what we talked about earlier about moving these to software systems on servers, combining multiple software systems on discrete servers to put them in the same place versus multiple boxes connected by other equipment that could cause lag. So I think it's all kind of blending into itself. I mean, we offer onboard content management systems that have zero lag. And so it's just a matter of building with that. If you're building with lag in mind and that's your key driver, then you've got to build with lag in mind and that's your key driver. And you have to kind of trade off some of the other bells and whistles that you might want from a content management or a compositing side on the content management system.
When will the HDMI and DisplayPort connectors be replaced with an Ethernet connection?
How much gold do you have? Yeah, I mean, Ethernet is limited by the bandwidth of Ethernet is limited by the resistance in the copper. I think the system as a whole has to change as we migrate away from. Cat 6 was a huge revolution. Any of the big bandwidth gains that are made in that world, I think, are only going to make that more and more of a reality. But
I still can't figure out when they made HDMI how they didn't put thumb screws in it.
They do have locking HDMI.
I'm kidding.
But I think that those are all, HDMI is driven by a consortium of engineers and scientists. DisplayPort technology is driven by a consortium of engineers and scientists. They're all trying to leap over each other constantly. But other than DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.1, I don't think you can transport 4K 60 at 444 color subsampling rate without an automatic downgrade anyway. So I think we're always going to be limited to that until it's all IoT and 5G and content on system, where it will basically remove all of those wired connections in the system and remove lag and increase bandwidth.
All right, that's about all we have time for now. So thank you.